The knife slipped against the tomato, nearly catching my finger. I steadied my hand and tried to focus on the perfectly symmetrical slices Joyce had requested for the anniversary platter. 40 years of marriage. The number felt heavy in my mouth, like a marble I could not quite swallow. Not too thick, Laura. My mother murmured from beside me, her hands busy arranging crackers in a spiral pattern. Your father likes them thin enough to see through. Of course he did. My father, Walter, liked everything exactly his way, thin, controlled, and perfectly presented for the world to see. I was adjusting my grip on the knife when the scream tore through the house. It was not the whiny pitch of a child demanding a toy or protesting bedtime. This was primal, raw. The kind of sound that bypasses your brain and goes straight to your gut, twisting everything inside you into knots. It was the cry of physical violation, of something fundamentally wrong happening to someone small and defenseless. The knife clattered against the cutting board. I was already moving, my feet carrying me toward the living room before my mind could catch up. Behind me, I heard Joyce gasp, but I did not stop. The back door slammed open with a violent thud. Travis burst through from the yard, his polo shirt still damp with sweat from moving that old rocking chair my father had insisted needed to be relocated right now, today, during the party setup. His eyes found mine for a split second wide, alarmed, a father's instinct firing on all cylinders. We reached the living room doorway at the same time. Ruby stood in the center of the cream-colored carpet, both hands clutching at her head, her small body trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. Her mouth was open in another scream, but this one caught in her throat, emerging as a broken sob that shattered something inside my chest. Copper-red curls, those beautiful, vibrant ringlets that caught the sunlight like spun flame, which I had spent 7 years carefully nurturing, lay scattered across the floor. They looked obscene there, severed and lifeless against the beige pile, like autumn leaves that had fallen too soon, and standing over my daughter, scissors still glinting in her hand, was my sister. Courtney's face wore an expression I had seen 1,000 times growing up, that particular blend of satisfaction and disdain she had perfected by age 12. Her thin blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail that did nothing to hide the chemical damage from years of bleaching. She looked at Ruby the way someone might look at a hedge they had just finished trimming. "What in the world are you doing?" The words exploded from my throat, loud enough to make Joyce flinch behind me. Courtney rolled her eyes, actually rolled them, and shifted her weight onto one hip. "Oh, relax, Laura. Drama queen much?" She gestured dismissively at Ruby with the scissors. "Now she will not be whipping that mop of hair into Kaylee's face anymore. Kids should not have hair like adults anyway. It looks annoying. I just gave her a bob cut to tidy it up." Tidy it up. I stared at my sister, at the complete absence of remorse in her expression, and something clicked into place. This was not about Kaylee getting hair in her face. This was about Ruby having something Courtney's daughter did not. This was about jealousy, pure and simple. Ruby's hair was spectacular, thick, healthy, and a rare shade of copper. Courtney and her daughter had thin, limp hair, damaged by years of chemical abuse. I had seen the tightness around Courtney's mouth every time someone praised Ruby's curls, but to actually do this? To take scissors to a child's head without warning? Travis's roar cut through my spiraling thoughts. He moved like a force of nature, all 6'2" and 210 pounds of contractor muscle and paternal fury, lunging toward Courtney with his hands outstretched. His face had gone dark red, veins standing out in his neck. My father materialized between them. Walter Henderson might have been 65, but he moved fast when his authority was challenged. He planted himself directly in Travis's path, one hand shooting up to jab a finger inches from my husband's face. "You touch my daughter and I will call the police and have you arrested for assaulting a woman immediately." Dad's voice boomed with that commanding tone that brooked no argument. Travis stopped. The effort it cost him was visible, his fists clenched so hard the knuckles went white, tendons standing out like cables under his skin. His eyes had gone bloodshot, staring at my father. "Travis, stop." My voice came out higher than I intended, edged with panic. "Do not hit her, please." In one smooth motion, he crossed to Ruby and scooped her into his arms, cradling her head against his chest so she would not have to see the hair on the floor. I could see the trap. Travis would be the one in handcuffs because he was a man and she was a woman, and my father was a pillar of the community. My hands shook as I pulled my phone from my pocket. I fumbled for the keypad, my thumb heading toward 911. Dad's hand shot out and snatched the phone from my grip. "Really, Laura?" His voice dropped to that reasonable, disappointed tone. "Today is your mother's big day. You are planning to call the police to handcuff your sister in front of all our guests? After your husband just tried to assault her? And if the police come, you think Travis will be safe? After what I just witnessed?" The words hit like physical blows. Guilt crashed over me, guilt for ruining the anniversary, guilt for putting Travis at risk, guilt for being the daughter who could not just smooth things over. "Laura, please!" Joyce's voice came from behind me, her hands wrapped in a dish towel, but she was not moving toward Ruby. She was looking at me with those tired, desperate eyes. "Let it go. She just made a mistake. Do not make a big scene. The neighbors will laugh at us." A mistake. My 7-year-old daughter stood there with butchered hair and tear-stained cheeks, traumatized and violated, and my mother called it a mistake. Something inside me went very still, very cold. It was the same feeling I had at 13 when Courtney stole my birthday money, and Dad said I was selfish for not sharing. The same feeling at 16 when she crashed my uncle's car, and I had to take the blame. The freeze response. That is what Travis's therapist friend called it. And I had been trained since childhood to freeze, to absorb the damage and smile for the photos. Not anymore. I walked over to my father and held out my hand. He stared at me, confusion crossing his face. "My phone," I said quietly. He handed it over, assuming I had backed down. I turned to Travis and jerked my head toward the door. He understood immediately. He was carrying Ruby and heading straight for the front door. At the doorway, Travis paused. He looked back at my father, and when he spoke, his voice was steady and cold. "You do not deserve to be a grandfather." Dad's face went purple. "You walk out that door, Laura, and you are out of the will. You hear me? Out. Not one penny." I met his eyes, held his gaze without flinching. "Keep your money." And I walked out the door, leaving 40 years of marriage and 32 years of conditioning scattered on the floor with my daughter's beautiful hair. The drive home was entombed in a silence so monolithic it felt as if the sky itself had collapsed into the car, pinning us to our seats under a weight no human chest was meant to carry. Outside the car windows, the world continued its indifferent hum, but inside, the air was stagnant. Ruby sat in her booster seat, her small frame swallowed by the shadows of the back seat. She stared out at the passing streetlights, her fingers periodically rising, trembling, to touch the jagged edges where her curls used to be. Every time her skin met those uneven tufts, she would flinch and pull away, as if she had touched a hot stove. Travis's knuckles were white against the steering wheel. In the dim light of the dashboard, I watched his jaw work, his teeth grinding with a rhythmic intensity. We had been married 9 years, and I knew that look. It was the expression of a man running through every dark scenario he wished he could execute but was forced to contain. When we finally pulled into our driveway, Ruby did not wait for the usual routine. She unbuckled herself and went straight to her room, bypassing her toy box and her favorite books. She retreated to the narrow space behind her bookshelf, where the walls met her tiny sanctuary, and sat there with her knees pulled tightly to her chest. "Ruby, sweetie?" I knelt at the edge of her retreat, keeping my voice as soft as a whisper. "Do you want to talk about what happened?" She shook her head, refusing to meet my eyes. "How about some juice? Or your favorite snack?" Another silent shake of the head. "I want to be alone," she finally whispered. The words were so faint they were nearly swallowed by the quiet of the room, but the message was absolute. The evening only grew more difficult. When the time came for her usual evening routine, the bathroom became a site of absolute terror. Ruby, who typically loved her bubble baths and plastic ducks, planted her feet and refused to cross the threshold. "No," she said, her voice rising with a frantic edge. "No bath." "Sweetheart, No, she backed away, her eyes wide with a look that chilled me to the bone. The water will touch my head. It will touch where she hurt me. I looked at Travis, feeling utterly helpless. He crouched down to her level, trying to offer a compromise. How about just a quick shower? We will help you, and we can use a plastic cap so your head stays completely dry. But she was already shaking her head violently, retreating further into the corner of the hallway. We let it go that night. We let her go to bed unwashed, because forcing her felt like committing another violation against her will. The following morning brought a discovery that broke my heart anew. While cleaning, I found them, all of them. The kitchen shears, my sewing scissors, the craft scissors from the junk drawer, and even the tiny nail clippers from the medicine cabinet. Ruby had gathered every blade in the house and hidden them in a neat pile under her bed, buried beneath her stuffed animals like contraband. Travis, I called out, my voice cracking, you need to see this. He appeared in the doorway, took one look at the pile of steel in my lap, and his face went gray. This was not a child's whim. This was a 7-year-old implementing a security protocol because she no longer felt safe in her own home. Later that afternoon, I gave her paper and crayons, hoping the art she usually loved might help her process the trauma. I busied myself with the dishes, stealing glances over my shoulder. When she finished, she held the paper up for me to see. It was a family portrait drawn in stick figures, a tall Travis, a medium-sized version of me, and a small Ruby. She had originally drawn herself with long curly hair, the red crayon applied in careful, beautiful swirls. But then, she had taken a black crayon and scribbled over her own head with such force that the paper had torn in places. Her face was obliterated by violent, dark slashes. Off to the side, she had drawn a figure I recognized as Courtney. Over that figure, Ruby had drawn a massive, dark X that covered the entire body. I had to leave the room before she saw the tears spill over. Travis spent the evening in his home office, his voice low and intense. He called his friend Marcus, who had gone to law school, and then another contact named Sterling, who worked in the district attorney's office. When he finally emerged hours later, his expression was hollow. What did they say? I asked, needing the confirmation, even if I already feared the answer. He sat down heavily on the couch, scrubbing his hands over his face. Marcus says that without physical injury, actual bruises, cuts, or blood, the police will view this as a civil family dispute. It is technically assault, but because the perpetrator is a biological aunt and the victim is her niece, the law is toothless. At most, it would be a misdemeanor resulting in a small administrative fine. Perhaps $200. That is it? The words felt flat in my mouth. Someone violates our daughter, and they pay the price of a few bags of groceries? The district attorney's office will not even touch it. Sterling said they are backlogged with violent crimes, and a haircut does not meet their threshold for prosecution. We could pursue a civil suit for emotional distress, but it would take months, cost thousands in legal fees, and there is no guarantee we would win. A judge might just dismiss it as a family matter. The realization settled over me like a cold shroud. The legal system, designed to protect the vulnerable, had no interest in our pain. If I wanted real justice for Ruby, I was going to have to deliver it myself. My phone chimed with a notification from Instagram. My stomach turned to ice as I looked at the screen. Courtney had posted a photo of Ruby's severed curls spread out on her kitchen counter, arranged in a cruel display. The caption read, "Finally fixed the brat's witch hair. Auntie knows best." 47 likes were already recorded, with comments from her friends laughing and praising her bravery. I showed the screen to Travis. His face went through several shades of red before settling on a dangerous, quiet purple. "She is bragging about it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. My phone rang, then my father's number. I answered, only to hear his voice booming with that same authoritative tone he had used my entire life. "You need to come home and apologize to your mother, Laura. You left early and ruined the party. Your mother cried herself to sleep. Is this how you treat her on her 40th anniversary?" "Is this a joke?" I snapped, my heart pounding. "Do not take that tone with me." "Ruby," is traumatized," I interrupted, my voice rising. "She will not bathe. She hid every pair of scissors in the house under her bed. She scribbled out her own face on a drawing. And you want me to apologize because Mother's feelings might be hurt? Your sister made a mistake in judgment. I will not return to that house until Courtney gets on her knees and apologizes to Ruby, face to face, a real apology." "You are being ridiculous and spiteful," he said coldly before hanging up the phone. That weekend, I took Ruby to a high-end salon downtown. I avoided our usual local spot and drove to a place with floor-to-ceiling windows and stylists who trained in the city. The receptionist took one look at Ruby's butchered hair, and her face softened immediately. The stylist, a man named Julian with kind eyes, circled Ruby's chair slowly. I watched his professional assessment shift into visible anger. "Who did this to you, honey?" he asked gently. Ruby's eyes filled with tears, but she did not answer. "Can you fix it?" I asked. Julian met my eyes in the mirror. "I can make it better, but I cannot make it what it was. She cut too high in some places. There is no evening this out without going very short, a pixie cut, perhaps 2 inches at the longest point." I looked at Ruby. She was gripping the arms of the styling chair so hard her knuckles were white. "Do what you have to do," I told him. It took an hour of precise, careful work. Julian chatted with Ruby about her favorite animals, trying to distract her from the sound of the blades near her ears. When he finally turned the chair around, the cut was objectively adorable. It highlighted her delicate features and made her eyes look massive, but it was not her. It was not the identity she had known for 7 years. Ruby looked in the mirror and started to cry quiet, broken tears that broke my heart. I paid Julian $300. He tried to refuse, but I insisted. He had salvaged what he could from a wreckage he had not created. On the way home, Ruby was silent, her fingers finding only empty air where her curls used to be. My phone, though on silent, continued to light up with messages from my father and updates from Courtney's social media. The law would not help. My parents would not help. But Courtney was about to learn that Auntie was not the only one who knew how to use a pair of scissors. The relentless barrage of digital harassment continued for days after we left my parents' house, the notifications on my phone acting like a series of small, stinging paper cuts. Each chime was a reminder that in the eyes of my extended family, I was no longer the victim, I was the villain. The first message to truly cut deep arrived as the early morning light began to gray the edges of our bedroom curtains. It was from my cousin Tabitha, sent at 6:47 a.m. "Really, Laura? Causing this much drama over a haircut? Courtney was just trying to help, and you embarrassed her in front of the whole family. It is time to grow up." I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold in my hand. Help? My sister had physically restrained my sobbing daughter and hacked off her hair while my father held me back. Yet somehow, in the span of 72 hours, the narrative had flipped. By noon, 17 more messages had flooded in. Aunt Priscilla, Uncle Silas, even second cousins I had not spoken to since high school, suddenly possessed very loud opinions about my parenting. The story Courtney was spinning was clear. Unstable Laura had overreacted to a simple trim. Poor Courtney was just being a helpful aunt. Laura is always so dramatic. One message even brought up a Thanksgiving from 3 years ago, implying I was prone to hysterics. They conveniently forgot that I had cried back then because Courtney had told 5-year-old Ruby that Santa Claus was a lie, laughing as my daughter's face crumpled. Courtney's pattern of cruelty was a lifelong habit, but she was an expert at making her malice look like an innocent mistake. As the days bled into weeks, the silence from my parents' house was louder than any shouting match. Ruby was slowly improving. The nightmares had decreased from every night to every few nights, but the trauma remained. She still flinched if anyone reached toward her head, and she had developed a habit of checking the locks on the front door before she could fall asleep. The tension reached a breaking point on a Tuesday afternoon when Travis walked into the kitchen, his phone held out with a look of grim focus. "What now?" I asked, my heart sinking. He turned the screen toward me. It was a text from Courtney. "Hey Travis, having a party this Saturday to celebrate my promotion to senior marketing director. Would love for you to come. 7 p.m. at my place. Can't wait to see you." I read the words twice, then a third time. She did not invite me, I said, the realization settling like lead in my stomach. "No," Travis replied, his voice tight. "She very specifically invited only me. She wants to drive a wedge between us, Laura. She thinks if she can get me in a room with the rest of the family, she can convince me that you are the one who is out of control." I waited for the familiar surge of helpless rage, but it did not come. Instead, I saw Travis's mouth twist into a cold, calculating smile. It was the look he wore when he was figuring out how to fix a structural flaw in a building objective, precise, and lethal. "She just made a critical, tactical error," he said slowly. "She assumes I am like your father. She thinks I will choose a peaceful party over my wife's dignity. She does not understand that you and Ruby are my only priority." He sat at the kitchen table and began to plan. "I am going to accept. I will play the part. I will tell her I am coming alone, and that I have calmed down about the whole incident. I will be your Trojan horse, Laura. I will get inside, let them lower their guard, and then I will open the door for you." Before I could respond, a heavy knock sounded at the front door. It was Willow, Travis's mother, carrying a casserole dish and a look of absolute fury. She had heard the family gossip through the neighborhood grapevine. "I heard what they are saying," Willow said, setting the dish down with enough force to rattle the silverware. "Tabitha's husband has been telling everyone that Laura lost her mind over a trim. That man," she said, referring to my father, "watched his granddaughter be violated and did nothing. That is not a family disagreement. That is child neglect. Walter Henderson failed as a grandfather, and Joyce failed as a grandmother. Her validation felt like a cool rain after a drought. Someone else saw it. Someone else knew that what happened in that living room was not a mistake. Teach them a lesson they will actually remember," Willow added, her eyes gleaming with protective maternal fire. "You have spent your whole life being the good daughter for people who do not value you. It is time to stop." After Willow left, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, watching the sunlight fade across the floorboards. Travis was already typing a warm, deceptive response to Courtney. "I need you to do something for me," I said, my voice steadier than it had been in a month. Travis looked up. "Anything. I need your professional dog clippers, the high-power ones you use for the German Shepherd." His fingers stilled over his phone. "Laura, if the law will not punish her for hurting our child, I will," I said. "I do not care if they arrest me. I do not care if the whole family hates me more than they already do. I need her to understand what she did. I need her to feel exactly what Ruby felt." Travis studied my face for a long moment, searching for any sign of hesitation. Finding none, he stood up and walked to the garage. I heard him rummaging through his tool chest. He returned with the clippers heavy, professional grade, and powerful enough to cut through the thickest coat without snagging. I watched as he serviced them with the same methodical attention he brought to every job. He oiled the blades, checked the alignment, and wiped down the housing. Then, he plugged them into the wall charger. "They will be fully charged by Saturday," he said quietly. "But listen to me. You cannot physically hurt her. No hitting, no scratching. As long as you keep it to the hair, they cannot claim you are a violent threat. The second you cross that line, you give them the narrative they want. Just the hair, Laura. Make it count." "Just the hair," I promised. The clippers sat on the counter, the small green light on the charger blinking like a heartbeat. Saturday was 4 days away. 4 days to prepare for the moment the good daughter finally disappeared for good. As the days toward the weekend began to blur into a haze of quiet preparation, the morning air on Thursday felt heavy with the scent of an inevitable change. It was time to set the trap. I sat at the kitchen table, my fingers hovering over my phone for a long moment before I finally placed the call to my mother. I forced my voice to sound soft, fragile, and deeply conciliatory, the voice of the daughter they had spent 32 years conditioning to apologize for things she never did. "Hi, Mom," I said when she picked up on the third ring. I was hoping we could talk. There was a heavy pause on the other end. I could practically hear her heart rate spike, her mind calculating whether this was an olive branch or a grenade. I have been doing a lot of thinking. I continued, letting a calculated tremor creep into my words. Maybe I did overreact. It was just such a shock, seeing Ruby's hair like that, and I was not thinking clearly. I should not have made such a scene at the anniversary celebration. I am so sorry for ruining your big day. Oh, Laura. Joyce's relief was so palpable it was almost offensive. I am so glad you are finally seeing reason. Your father and I have been so worried about you. We just want the family back together. I want to make things right, I said, leaning into the lie. Courtney invited Travis to her party on Saturday, and I was thinking, maybe I could come too, to apologize properly to her and the family. She invited Travis? Joyce sounded genuinely surprised. Not you? I think she is still hurt by how I acted, I replied, suppressing a surge of fury. But I really want to fix this, Mom. We are family after all. I heard muffled conversation on the other end. Joyce had covered the mouthpiece to speak with my father. A few seconds later, she returned. I think that would be wonderful, dear. I will let Courtney know you are coming. She will be so happy you are ready to move past this unfortunate misunderstanding. After I hung up, the silence of the kitchen felt deafening. Travis appeared in the doorway, his eyebrows raised in a silent question. Hook, line, and sinker. I said flatly, They actually think you are going to show up and grovel. Travis shook his head. Their arrogance is our greatest weapon. However, our plan hit a heartbreaking hurdle that afternoon. When I mentioned hiring a babysitter for Saturday evening, Ruby's reaction was immediate and visceral. No. She grabbed my arm, her gray eyes wide with a panic I had never seen before. No, Mommy, I do not want to stay with a stranger. Sweetheart, it is just for a few hours while Mom and Dad run an errand. No. Her voice climbed to a frantic pitch. What if you do not come back? What if someone hurts me again and you are not there to stop them? My heart shattered. This was what Courtney had truly stolen. My child's sense of fundamental safety. Ruby, I promise we will be right back. That is what you said before. Tears were streaming down her face now. You said you would be right there at Grandpa's house, and then you let Aunt Courtney cut my hair, and Grandpa would not let you stop her. Travis knelt down beside her, his large hands gentle on her shoulders. He looked at me, and I saw the shift in his eyes. We could not force her to stay. Not after we had already failed her once. Okay, I said softly, stroking her short, uneven hair. Okay, baby, you are coming with us. But Mom, Ruby hiccuped, her chest heaving. What if Aunt Courtney tries to cut my hair again? What if she sees it? Travis stood up abruptly and left the room, returning moments later with a package he had hidden in the hall closet. He sat cross-legged on the floor at Ruby's level. Ruby, he said solemnly, I got you something special. I ordered this for your birthday next month, but I think you need it for our mission right now. This is a piece of high-level secret agent equipment. Her tears slowed as she looked at the package. Secret agent? He opened it to reveal a beanie hat in deep purple, Ruby's absolute favorite color. It featured a silver emblem on the front, a stylized female superhero symbol. This, Travis said, is an invisibility helmet. When you wear this helmet, it has two special powers. First, no one can harm you while it is on your head. Second, and most important, it makes your hair completely invisible to anyone who might want to touch it. You will be a spy, Ruby, a secret agent on an operation with Mom and Dad. Ruby touched the fabric carefully. Like in my comics? Exactly like that. Can you help us with the mission? Ruby looked at herself in the hallway mirror as she pulled the beanie on. With her hair tucked away, she looked different, protected. I can do it, she said, her voice finally steady. As the sun began to dip below the horizon on Saturday, the transition from day to night felt like the closing of a chapter. I showered, did my makeup with practiced precision, and chose a simple muted dress that screamed, apologetic daughter. I did not want to look like a threat. The large tote bag sat by the front door. Inside, wrapped in a thick plush towel, the dog clippers waited. They were fully charged, the blades sharp and oiled to a professional standard. Travis had already left an hour earlier, ensuring he could gauge the atmosphere before we arrived. His final text came through at 6:47 p.m. In position. Walter is already 3 beers in. Courtney is holding court. Give me 20 minutes, then come. Ruby held my hand tightly as we walked up the steps to Courtney's townhouse. Through the windows, I could see the party was already loud, the clink of glasses, the hum of laughter from relatives and Courtney's work colleagues. None of them seemed to care that a child had been terrorized just weeks ago. Remember, I whispered to Ruby, you are a secret agent. Stay close to Daddy and keep your invisibility helmet on no matter what. She nodded, her small hand squeezing mine. Inside, the heat of the party hit us instantly. Travis spotted us immediately. He was standing with my father near the bar, and I saw him subtly shift his position, creating a clear, safe corridor between the living room and the exit. Courtney saw me a few seconds later. Her expression cycled through triumph, and then a smug satisfaction that made my skin crawl. She glided over a glass of expensive vodka in her hand. Laura. She smiled, though it did not reach her eyes. Mom said you might show up. I am so glad you decided to join the celebration. Thank you for having me, I said, the words feeling like dry sand in my mouth. I really wanted to apologize for the scene I made at the anniversary. Water under the bridge, Courtney said magnanimously. She glanced down at Ruby. Oh, cute hat, kiddo. Is that the new hiding look? Ruby stayed silent, pressing against my leg. Good girl. Stay quiet. The first hour was a test of my absolute limits. I smiled. I mingled. And I let Aunt Priscilla and Uncle Silas pat my shoulder and tell me how mature I was being for moving past the hair incident. Travis kept Walter engaged in a long-winded conversation about construction, permits, keeping him distracted, and drinking. By 8:30 p.m., the atmosphere had shifted. Courtney was noticeably drunk, that dangerous, sharp-edged intoxication where her cruelty was disguised as being the life of the party. She began to zero in on Ruby, who was sitting quietly in a chair near Travis. Ruby! Courtney's voice cut through the music. Why are you wearing that hat inside? That is so rude, honey. Take it off. Ruby's hand flew to her beanie. Travis started to move toward her, but Courtney was faster, fueled by liquid courage and the need to dominate. She set her glass down and pulled out her phone, opening a live stream app. I could see the little red live dot on the screen. Come on, Ruby, Courtney coaxed, her words slightly slurred as she addressed her followers. Show everyone Auntie's masterpiece. I bet your hair is growing back already. Everyone, look how much better she looks without that red mop. Before I could reach her, Courtney reached out and yanked the beanie off Ruby's head. My daughter's butchered, uneven hair, the jagged evidence of Courtney's jealousy, was exposed to the entire room and the thousands of people watching the stream. See? Courtney laughed into the camera. Much tidier. Why are you still sulking, Ruby? Auntie did you a favor? Ruby did not cry, but I saw her lower lip tremble as she tried to shield her head with her hands. The final straw. I stood up. Every conversation in the room died. Courtney was still holding her phone up, waiting for me to scream, waiting for me to prove her narrative that I was unstable. Instead, I smiled. It was a cold, sharp expression that made Courtney's smile falter. You are absolutely right, Courtney, I said, walking toward her with a calm that seemed to unnerve the guests. I am? She blinked, confused. Hair is just hair, is it not? I continued, my voice steady and clear. It grows back. We really should not care so much about appearance. After all, as you said, it was just a haircut. Courtney nodded, her ego swelling again. Exactly. I am so glad you finally figured that out, Laura. I knew you would come around eventually. I am very glad, I said softly, reaching into the tote bag I had carried with me all evening, that we share the same view on this. My fingers closed around the solid, heavy weight of the clippers. I could feel the hum of the battery through the towel. Courtney was smiling at her live stream, completely unguarded, already beginning to tell her audience about our beautiful reconciliation. She had no idea that the mission had just entered its final phase.
I pulled the clippers from the bag, the plush towel falling to the floor like a discarded skin. My thumb found the switch, and the motor came to life with a predatory bzzz. It was a sound that belonged in a barber shop or a garage, not a high-end townhouse party, and it ripped through the atmosphere like a chainsaw. Courtney's eyes widened, the pupils shrinking to pinpricks. She opened her mouth to speak, to laugh, to mock, but I was already moving. I did not strike her. I did not scratch her. I reached out with my left hand and snagged her high, tight ponytail. I did not just hold it. I used it as an anchor, tilting her head back slightly so her forehead was exposed and she was forced to look up at me. With my right hand, I pressed the vibrating teeth of the clippers directly against the center of her hairline. Before she could even scream, I plowed the machine straight back. I did not hesitate. I did not waver. I moved with the steady, practiced hand of someone reclaiming a stolen piece of their soul. The professional-grade blades sliced through her fine blonde strands as if they were nothing more than spider webs. A wide, pale strip of scalp appeared instantly, a stark white road running through a forest of blonde. I continued the motion, driving the clippers over the crown of her head and down toward the nape of her neck. As the blades reached the base of her skull, the tension of the ponytail I was holding snapped, and the severed mass of hair went limp in my fist. I let go. Courtney stumbled backward, her hands flying to her head. Her fingers landed in the smooth, hairless valley I had just carved through the center of her scalp. A reverse mohawk, perfectly centered, undeniably permanent. The room erupted, not into noise, but into a chaotic, breathless scramble. Guests dropped glasses. Champagne spilled across the hardwood like liquid gold. Courtney finally found her voice, a high-pitched, jagged wail that sounded more like a wounded animal than a human being. "My hair! Oh my hair!" she shrieked, her body shaking with a primal, hysterical terror. I stepped closer, my shadow falling over her as she collapsed onto her knees. I leaned down, my voice a low, chilling whisper that was meant only for her, even as the room watched in horror. "Shh, keep it down," I said, echoing the exact tone our father had used on me 3 weeks ago. "You are ruining the party." The recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her sobbing hitched, her eyes locking onto mine with a realization that was far more painful than the loss of her hair. She remembered. She knew exactly what debt was being settled. "You insane!" Walter's roar came from the bar area. I saw him out of the corner of my eye. My father, the pillar of the community, was charging toward me, his face a terrifying, bruised shade of purple. His fist was balled, his arm cocked back. He was going to hit me. He was going to do what he had threatened Travis with, but with none of the restraint. He never reached me. Travis moved like a mountain falling into place. 1 second he was 10 feet away, and the next he was a wall of muscle between me and my father's rage. He caught Walter by the shoulders, not with a punch, but with a massive, controlled shove that sent the older man reeling backward until he hit the sofa with a heavy thud. "Try touching my wife," Travis said. His voice was not a shout. It was the low, vibrating growl of a predator protecting his own. I looked down at the mass of blonde hair still clutched in my left hand. I walked over to where Courtney sat wailing on the floor and dropped the limp, severed bundle into her lap. She flinched as if I had dropped a live coal on her. I straightened my dress, my heart still hammering, but my soul feeling lighter than it had in years. I addressed the room, my voice steady and loud enough to be heard over Courtney's whimpering. "I just renovated your head, Courtney," I said, my tone as sharp as the blades in my bag. "Now it looks much airier, exactly the open concept standard you always advertise in your listings." A shocked, stifled laugh broke out from somewhere near the kitchen, one of Courtney's own colleagues, no doubt. It was the sound of the narrative shifting. The crazy sister was gone. In her place was a mother who had simply had enough. I walked over to Ruby, who was standing by Travis's leg. I took her small, trembling hand in mine. "The mission is over, secret agent," I whispered. "Let's go home." We walked out of that townhouse, leaving behind the wreckage of my sister's vanity and my father's authority scattered on the floor alongside the hair of a woman who finally learned that some things, once cut, can never be mended. The air outside was crisp, the night sky a deep, unforgiving indigo, as the first flash of blue and red lights began to dance against the brickwork of the townhouse. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal filings and public reckonings. I did not let Courtney off the hook. I filed a civil suit for the recovery of Ruby's therapy costs. When the video of Courtney's cruelty and the spectacular renovation of her hair went viral on social media, the consequences were absolute. She was fired from her brokerage firm within 48 hours. They could not have a child abuser representing their brand. She settled the civil suit out of court, paying the $5,000 for Ruby's therapy sessions. When Walter and Joyce attempted to petition the court for grandparents' visitation rights, claiming we were alienating them from their grandchild, the judge took one look at the records of neglect and the toxic environment they had fostered. Petition denied, the judge ruled. Contact is not in the best interest of the minor child. They were left in their quiet, empty house, whispered about by neighbors who had finally seen behind the perfect Henderson curtain. Courtney eventually moved 2 states away, reportedly working a retail job and wearing a series of expensive wigs to hide the slow, patchy regrowth of her hair. The passage of 6 months felt like a slow, healing exhale. The winter frost had given way to the vibrant, stubborn green of early spring, and our lives had transformed in the quiet. I stood in the doorway of the community center gym, watching Ruby. She was dressed in a crisp, white karate gi, her stance strong and her eyes bright with a newfound fire. Her copper curls had grown back, wild and vibrant, bouncing with every strike she practiced against the pads Travis held for her. "Ki!" Ruby shouted, her small foot connecting with a solid thwack against the leather. She no longer needed her invisibility helmet. She no longer checked the locks on the doors 3 times before bed. She was learning that she had the power to protect herself, and more importantly, she knew that her parents would move mountains to stand beside her. Travis caught my eye over the top of the training pads, and winked. He had been her rock, the man who showed her that strength was not about bullying the weak, but about shielding the innocent. I looked at the photo I had just taken on my phone, not for evidence this time, but for joy. I realized then that real family is not a matter of blood or shared DNA, it is a choice. It is the people who refuse to look away when you are hurting. It is the people who are willing to be the villain in someone else's story, if it means being the hero in yours. Many people might say I was too cruel for what I did to Courtney. They might say my methods were extreme. But they do not understand the feeling of watching your child's spirit being crushed by the people who were supposed to love her. I looked at my daughter's laughter, at the wild copper curls dancing in the gym light, and I knew I would make that same choice 1,000 times over. That was my family, and that was enough.